All right, so we had a great question that almost sounds like a bit of a science fiction question, but it was about whether or not pathogens can actually change the functional characteristics of hosts. Right? Can being infected with something actually change what the host does, how the host functions, the host physiology, and host behavior? And while that might sound really far-fetched, I think there are a huge number of examples of ways, both either through infection or in fact through integration into host DNA, that infection with a pathogen, very oftentimes viruses, can in fact change the functional characteristics of the host. And I think there's some great examples both in the plant world and in the animal world.
They're really great examples of parasites. I mean, for me, parasites change behavior, so that's what I work on a lot. And we see this in examples such as the zombie ants, which are well known, and Carl Zimmer, who's done a lot of, the great science writer, has done a lot of advocacy for looking at parasites controlling behavior. And he calls this zombie biology. So viruses manipulating caterpillars or fungi manipulating ants, which is what we study. And recently he was writing about a really cool story, which is toxoplasma. So toxoplasma is a single-celled organism, which is very similar to malaria. And what it does is it infects mammals and infects rats. And normally rats would lose their innate fear of cats, but when infected by this single-celled organism, which is sitting inside the brain, the rats actually approach the cat and get consumed. And this is to the benefit of the parasite, because the parasite in this case has two parties in its life cycle, the rat and the cat. And so it causes the rats to lose their innate fear. We've known about this for about 15, 20 years. Beautiful work by Joanne Webster. And then more recently we saw, well, what was happening was that the rat has become sexually attracted to the cat. And it only works towards cats, not to some other predator, for example. And so that was really interesting. There was actually some changes in the amygdala part of the brain. And very recently there was a paper had come out showing that what the parasite is doing, in the words of Carl Zimmer, is essentially playing the animal's brain like a piano keys. So just changing the expression of the genes by affecting the methylation of those genes. The parasite is playing with parts of the expression of the animal's genes through a process called epigenetics. And so as Carl Zimmer described it, this parasite was literally playing with the expression in a way to control the behavior, in this case making the rat more attracted to cats by actually changing key components of the amygdala. Whether we'll find parasites actually embedding themselves into the genome to control behavior, that's something to be discovered in the future. We don't know. We do know a story of a virus which controls caterpillars. In this case, what the virus has done, it has actually taken a gene from the caterpillar and put that into its own viral genome. So there's probably a lot of this, something we call molecular crosstalk, and probably borrowing of genes from one part to the other. Really fascinating stuff.
Right. But Marilyn, you've worked on quite a few cases where infection with a virus actually expands niches and expands the range of ecological conditions that plants can tolerate.
So plants, but there are a number of different examples where plants are able to adapt to extreme environments due to viruses. So we worked on one in Yellowstone National Park where plants grow in these very hot geothermal soils, and that actually turns out to be, the plants have to be colonized with a fungus, the fungus has to be infected with the virus, so you have to have all three partners there in order for this to happen. And we're still teasing out the molecular details of it, but we know that some of the fungal components like trehalose and some of the pigments that can be osmoprotectants, can protect against dehydration, those are increased with the virus there, so they may be playing this role. But there's actually a very interesting story about a plant virus that affected human behavior, which I thought maybe you might like to hear.
Let's hear that one.
So back in the 17th century, some Dutch trader got a tulip bulb from Turkey, and the tulips were striped. And well, you know, the Dutch have had a long history of loving their tulips, and this was, they were absolutely fascinated with these striped tulips. They fell in love with them, but the striping wasn't always stable, so sometimes it would be lost when they propagated the tulips. And they had no way of knowing whether it was going to be there or not, and so there was all this speculation on the bulbs, and in fact it was considered now it's called tulipomania, and it was the first economic bubble.
Right.
And the stripes in the tulips were caused by a virus. So the virus, it's a potyvirus, it actually interferes with pigment production. And there are many, many examples of these we call them the ornamental viruses now, because there are lots of viruses that make plants more beautiful to humans. We like them better, so it's an advantage to the virus,
Right.
because we help keep it alive, keep it going.
Are there any instances where the virus affects the ultraviolet light reflection and so increases the chances of pollination by a bee or something?
There may very well be, yeah. There's speculation that happens, but I don't think there's any good documented cases of that. But yeah, but we do know like viruses will change the coloration of the leaves, and that can attract aphids, for example. So there are, and viruses also can affect a lot of the volatiles that the plants make to attract other insects. In fact, there's a really cool story with aphids where the virus makes something that attracts the aphids. And then when the aphids start feeding, it makes something that makes the aphids go blick and move off to another plant. So that actually increases the transmission.